who only died like maybe 10, 11 years ago. She was in her 90s, and she, towards the end, she was suffering from dementia, and she spoke about her life in Europe, how they all lived with a lot of children, and how they all lived in one room, and they lived on a farm, and how her father worked, how her mother, they had a grocery store, and how her mother worked so very hard, and different things, and how they. And she says how the Russians or the Polish and whatever they were, they would come around, and Jews, they would be pulling their beards and really abusing them in Europe. And you know what? I always said to myself, I said, these people had so much guts. They had such guts to come to a foreign country without knowing the language, the customs, everything about it, to get on a ship and to come to a strange country. I mean, it was insurmountable, I mean, they were really basically didn't have much of an education, if they had any. Really took a lot of guts. They all had slightly different names than the names that I remember of her and her siblings. Was not a good time. Listen, if it was so good there, they wouldn't have come here. I mean, that was a deduction I always had. That life was very hard there for them, especially being Orthodox. My grandmother was Orthodox with a sheikel, and I never remember her speaking English. She would sit by the window. I remember they lived in Williamsburg on South 9th Street. And she would be sitting and davening and reading, and praying all day long. I said, oh God, I hope we're all going to be safe and healthy with all her praying, all day long. Grandfather died when I was like 2 years old. But I remember my mother's mother, big dining room table. They didn't have a living room. They had a big dining room table, and all the children would come on the holidays. Everybody would get dressed up, and they would have a feast. They would cook for days, and because there were a lot of children and grandchildren, those are the memories, that going back, growing up. On my father's side, I remember during the war years, he had two younger brothers. Of course, they separated. My father's father came here, and she followed. There were two children that were born in Europe, my father and his older brother. So there was a separation. There were more children, but they died. In Europe, they died. It was very common thing. Yeah. So my father and his older brother, and then when they got together again after 10 years, there were two more children that were born. So there was like a 12, 14 year separation between his older brothers and his younger brothers. So I remember the younger brothers going to war during the Second World War because they were young. And my father almost got drafted because he was about 35 during that time. And they were drafting people then. Older boys, my father and his older brother. Then they had two more. They went into service, and my father almost went into service too, but they just cut it off because he was 35 at the time, and they just cut it off in time with married men with children didn't have to go, and as I remember sleeping over at my grandmother's house, sleeping in the same bed with her because there was no other room, and I didn't sleep. Because every time the clock went off, every hour I would hear like you have here, this kind of thing, and so that brings me back these memories. And the year the war was over, 1945, I think I was like 10, 11 years old, and we were in Coney Island. We had a place in Coney Island where we spent the summer. And on the boardwalk, they had this Half Moon Hotel. And during the war years, it became a naval hospital. And boardwalk on VJ Day became, everybody went bananas on there, on the boardwalk. Everybody, they were kissing each other, and everybody was
happy.
I mean, the joyfulness was wonderful to see, and it was a lasting memory for me. Seeing all this and seeing the end of the war. You know, I didn't have that many recollections of the war when it first started. It was too young. But seeing that part was a wonderful thing to remember. The end of the war.